The platinum band slipped from Meredith Carson's finger with surprising ease, as if even her wedding ring knew the marriage was over before she did. She stared at the empty space where it had rested for 16 years, a pale indentation, the only evidence it had ever been there at all. "Are you sure about this?" Alicia asked, her voice gentle but firm as she slid a legal document across the mahogany table. The divorce attorney's office was deliberately designed to feel more like a living room than a place where marriages came to die, but the illusion did nothing to soften the moment. "No, I'm not sure," Meredith admitted, brushing a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "But I'm doing it anyway." Her attorney nodded with practiced empathy. "You've given him every chance, Meredith. The separation period, the counseling sessions he never showed up for, the ultimatums that led nowhere." Meredith reached for the pen, her hand trembling slightly. 16 years, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "I gave him 16 years. As she signed her name, her phone buzzed with an incoming text. She ignored it, focusing on completing the final signature that would begin the process of legally untangling her life from Ian's. "Once we serve these papers, there's a mandatory waiting period," Alicia explained. "During this time, make sure you document everything. And I mean everything, especially regarding your assets." The phone buzzed again, insistently. Meredith sighed and glanced down. "Unknown number. Is this Meredith Carson? I'm so sorry to bother you, but I think I might have something that belongs to you. My name is Julia Winters." Meredith frowned at the strange message. Before she could respond, a photo appeared on her screen, a woman's hand displaying a distinctive sapphire and diamond bracelet. The Tiffany piece her grandmother had left her. The one that had been missing from her jewelry box for months. "Meredith, are you okay?" Alicia asked, noticing how the color had drained from her client's face. With shaking hands, Meredith turned her phone around to show her attorney the image. "This is from my grandmother's collection. Ian told me it must have been stolen when we had the kitchen renovated last year." Her voice hardened, but apparently he gave it to someone named Julia. A second message appeared beneath the photo. "Your husband gave this to me, saying I deserved it more than his wife. I just found out he's married. I think we need to talk." 6 months earlier, Meredith had been a different person, one who still believed her marriage could be saved. She'd been stirring a pot of bolognese sauce when Ian came through the door, his suit jacket slung over his shoulder, his tie loosened. "Something smells amazing," he'd said, dropping his briefcase by the door and coming up behind her to plant a kiss on her neck. She'd relaxed into him briefly, savoring the moment of normal married life. These moments had become increasingly rare over the past year as Ian's work hours grew longer and his emotional presence diminished. "It's your favorite," she'd said. "I thought we could have a proper dinner tonight. Maybe open that bottle of Barolo we've been saving." Ian had pulled away then, checking his phone. Mare, I can't. Conference call with Singapore at 8. I'll have to take it in the home office." The disappointment had been familiar, a dull ache she'd grown accustomed to. "It's our anniversary, Ian. 16 years. He'd looked genuinely surprised, then chagrined. "God, I'm an idiot. I completely forgot." He'd kissed her forehead in apology. "Rain check? I promise I'll make it up to you this weekend." But the weekend had come and gone like so many before it, filled with Ian's mysterious errands and business emergencies. When she'd found the receipt for an expensive restaurant dinner, one they hadn't shared, tucked into his suit pocket while doing laundry, she'd confronted him. "It was a client dinner," he'd said dismissively. "Davidson Pharmaceuticals. We're trying to land their account." "On a Sunday night?" she'd asked. "With a $300 bottle of champagne?" "That's how business gets done, Meredith," he'd snapped. "Not everyone works banker's hours like your museum job." The comment had stung. Her position as a curator at the city's Contemporary Art Museum wasn't just a job to her, it was a passion, one that Ian had once shared and encouraged. 2 weeks later, she'd noticed her grandmother's sapphire bracelet was missing from her jewelry box. Then her diamond teardrop earrings. Then the emerald pendant Ian had given her for their 10th anniversary. "We should file a police report," she'd insisted, panic rising in her throat. "And say what?" That your jewelry disappeared with no signs of forced entry. Ian had reasoned. It was probably one of the kitchen contractors. They had access to the house for weeks. The insurance will cover it. She'd believed him, just as she'd believed all his explanations over the years. The late nights. The business trips that extended without notice. The text messages he shielded from her view. Until she hadn't anymore. 2 weeks after signing the divorce papers, Meredith sat across from Julia Winters at a quiet cafe 3 towns over from her home. The young woman was beautiful in an understated way, early 30s, with warm brown eyes and a nervous energy that manifested in constantly tucking her blonde hair behind her ears. "Thank you for meeting me," Julia said, her hands wrapped around a mug of chai tea. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," Meredith admitted, studying the woman who had unknowingly become entangled in her marriage. "But I need to understand what happened." Julia nodded, pulling out her phone. "I have pictures of everything he gave me. I've already packed it all up to return to you." Meredith scrolled through the images, her stomach tightening with each swipe. Her grandmother's sapphire bracelet, the diamond earrings, the emerald pendant, and several pieces she hadn't even realized were missing. "How long?" Meredith asked, her voice surprisingly steady. 8 months, Julia replied, her eyes downcast. "He told me he was separated, that the divorce was being finalized." She looked up, tears brimming. "I believed him when he said these were family pieces he'd bought from his ex-wife in the settlement. That he wanted me to have them, because I deserved them more than she ever had." Meredith felt as if she'd been struck. Those were his exact words? Julia nodded miserably. "I'm so sorry. When I found your photo in his wallet last week, behind his credit cards where he thought I wouldn't look, I knew something wasn't right. I did some digging and found your name, then your work email at the museum." "How did you get my number?" Meredith asked. "I didn't," Julia admitted. "I texted the number saved in his phone under Home. I figured it might be you." The realization that Ian had relegated her to simply Home in his contacts, while likely having a more personal entry for Julia, was just another small cut in the 1,000 that had shredded her marriage. "There's something else," Julia said hesitantly. "The reason I looked in his wallet in the first place was because I found these." She slid several folded papers across the table. "They were in his desk when I was looking for a charger." Meredith unfolded the papers to find insurance claim forms. Claims for her missing jewelry, listed as stolen items. All had been filed, processed, and paid out, to the tune of nearly $200,000. "He collected insurance money for jewelry he gave to you," Meredith said slowly, the implications landing like hammer blows. "That's fraud." "It gets worse," Julia said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I think he's done this before. With other women." "What do you mean, other women?" Meredith asked, her hands gripping the insurance papers so tightly they began to crumple. Julia glanced around nervously before pulling out a small leather journal. "I found this in the same drawer as the insurance forms. It looks like a record of some sort." Meredith opened the journal with trembling fingers. Inside was a meticulous accounting, names, dates, jewelry items, insurance claim numbers, and payout amounts. The entries went back nearly 5 years. Her name headed the first column, followed by at least 6 others. Julia's name was the most recent. "There are photographs, too," Julia said softly, sliding her phone across the table again. "Tap on that folder." The images showed Ian with different women in different cities. In some, the women were wearing pieces of jewelry Meredith recognized, not just her own, but items that had belonged to Ian's mother and grandmother. Family heirlooms he'd claimed to cherish. "He told me he traveled for work," Meredith said numbly. "All those business trips. We'd meet in different cities," Julia confirmed. "New York, Chicago, San Francisco." He said it was exciting, romantic. A chance to get away from his stressful job. Meredith felt sick. "His job is the excuse he gave me for being away from home." "I don't think it's just the jewelry," Julia continued hesitantly. "From what I can piece together, he's been systematically moving money around, setting up accounts in different names. The gifts were just part of a larger scheme." Meredith stared at her, the fog of betrayal lifting enough for sharp clarity to cut through. You've been investigating him. Julia nodded, her expression hardening slightly. I'm a forensic accountant. When I suspected he was lying about being divorced, I started looking deeper. Old habits die hard. She hesitated. There's a pattern here, Meredith. He finds women with access to valuable items or money. He charms them, takes what he can, files false claims, then moves on. And you think I'm just another victim in his scheme? Meredith asked, anger flaring. No, Julia said emphatically. You're different. You're his wife. From what I can tell, you're the foundation, the legitimate front for everything else. Meredith stood abruptly, gathering the papers. I need to talk to my lawyer. Wait, Julia called as Meredith headed for the door. What are you going to do? Meredith turned back, a cold determination settling over her. I'm going to take back what's mine. It's definitely fraud, Alicia confirmed, examining the insurance documents in her office later that day. Multiple counts. And if the pattern holds across state lines, it's federal. So what do we do? Meredith asked, pacing the length of the office. Call the police? The FBI. Eventually, yes, Alicia said. But there's strategy to consider first. Once this becomes a criminal matter, the divorce proceedings get complicated. Assets get frozen. Everything slows down. I don't care about that, Meredith insisted. I want him stopped. And he will be, Alicia assured her. But if we're smart about this, we can protect your interests first. The divorce is already in motion. Let's use that to secure your position before we blow everything up. Meredith sank into a chair, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. I can't believe this is happening. 16 years, and I never saw it. People like Ian count on that, Alicia said gently. They hide in plain sight. They use the trust of those closest to them as a shield. There's something else, Meredith said after a moment. Something I haven't told you. She reached into her bag and pulled out a flash drive. Before I left for the separation, I copied some financial records. I was worried about him hiding money in the divorce. I never imagined. Alicia took the drive, her expression serious. This could be crucial evidence. But it also means you've been suspicious for longer than you've admitted. Meredith nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I think part of me always knew something wasn't right. I just didn't want to face it. Well, now we face it together, Alicia said firmly. And we make a plan. 3 weeks later, Meredith stood in the foyer of what had once been her home, watching Ian's face as he processed the sight of her and Julia sitting side by side in the living room. The shock, confusion, and quick calculation that played across his features confirmed everything she now knew about the man she'd married. Meredith, he said cautiously, I didn't know you'd be stopping by today. His eyes darted to Julia, then back to Meredith. And you've brought a friend? Hello, Ian, Julia said, her voice steady. Surprise. The color drained from his face. What is this? Please sit down, Meredith said, gesturing to the armchair across from them. We have a lot to discuss. Ian remained standing, his body tense. I don't know what you think is happening here, but... Stop, Meredith interrupted. Just stop the lies, Ian. We know everything. Julia and I have had some very enlightening conversations, Meredith continued, opening a folder on the coffee table. About jewelry, insurance claims, your other women. Ian's expression hardened. Whatever she's told you, she's lying. She's unstable, Meredith. I've been trying to end things with her for months. Julia laughed, the sound utterly devoid of humor. That's rich, considering you asked me to move in with you last week. After you gave me this. She held up her hand, where Meredith's grandmother's ruby ring glittered on her finger. Ian took a step backward, as if physically struck. This is a misunderstanding. Is it? Meredith asked, spreading photographs across the table. Images of Ian with different women, each wearing pieces of jewelry that had supposedly been stolen. Is Catherine a misunderstanding? Or Diane? Or Rachel? Where did you get those? Ian demanded, his charm evaporating. From your very organized records, Meredith said. You really shouldn't keep evidence of your crimes so close at hand, especially when you're bringing women back to your house. Our house, he corrected automatically. No, Meredith said, her voice like steel. My house. The deed is in my name. Remember? You insisted on it because of some tax strategy you claimed would benefit us. She smiled thinly. I suppose I should thank you for that particular manipulation. Ian moved toward the door. I don't have to listen to this. You're clearly hysterical, and you've dragged this poor woman into your delusions. The insurance investigators don't think I'm delusional, Meredith said quietly. Neither does the FBI agent I spoke with yesterday. Ian froze, his hand on the doorknob. You're bluffing. Am I? Meredith asked. Agent Donovan was particularly interested in the pattern of claims across multiple states. The fraud division at Sentinel Insurance has already flagged all your recent claims for investigation. She stood up, crossing to him with measured steps. But here's what's going to happen now, Ian. You're going to sign these papers. She held up a document. It's a revised divorce agreement. One that gives me everything. The house, my business interests that you tried to entangle with yours, and full restitution for all the jewelry you stole. That's extortion, he hissed. No, it's a settlement, she corrected. One that might keep you out of federal prison. Maybe. You wouldn't, he said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. You still love me. 16 years, Meredith. That doesn't just disappear. The words, so similar to what she'd been telling herself for months, struck her like a slap. You're right, she said softly. 16 years doesn't just disappear. It gets systematically dismantled, piece by piece, lie by lie, betrayal by betrayal. She moved closer, until they were inches apart. I've contacted the other women, Ian. All of them. We've been comparing notes, building a case. Catherine's brother is a district attorney in Boston. Did you know that when you were romancing her with my mother's pearls? The flicker of fear in his eyes told her he hadn't. Sign the papers, she said again. Or I make the call, and agents show up here within the hour. Your choice. For a moment, she thought he might lash out. His hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tight with rage. Then, like a switch being flipped, his demeanor changed. The charming smile she'd once loved appeared. Let's be reasonable, Mayor, he said, his voice softening. We can work this out between us. We don't need lawyers or federal agents. Remember Bali? How happy we were. We could have that again. Meredith felt a wave of nausea at how easily he slipped into manipulation. How many times had this tactic worked on her before? The papers, Ian, she said firmly. Now. He held her gaze for a long moment, then snatched the document from her hand. Fine. You want everything? Take it. It was never about the money anyway. Then what was it about? She asked, genuine curiosity breaking through her resolve. He paused, pen hovering over the signature line. The game, he said simply. The thrill of it. Seeing what I could get away with. He signed with a flourish. But you know what? You were always the biggest prize, Meredith. The respectable wife. The perfect cover. The truth, so casually delivered, should have devastated her. Instead, it washed over her like a cleansing rain, washing away the last of her doubts. Get out, she said quietly. Your things have been packed. They're in storage. The code is your mother's birthday, the real one, not the one you've been lying about for years. He stared at her, momentarily thrown. Then he laughed. You really have been busy, haven't you? You have no idea, Julia said, speaking up from where she'd been watching. The FBI doesn't just want to talk about the insurance fraud, Ian. They're also interested in those offshore accounts you set up. The ones you use for your little side businesses. Ian's face went completely still. What do you know about that? Enough, Meredith answered. More than enough. Without another word, Ian turned and walked out the door. Meredith watched through the window as he got into his car and drove away, taking 16 years of lies with him. Do you think he'll run? Julia asked, coming to stand beside her. Yes, Meredith said. But it won't matter. How can you be sure? Meredith turned to her, a small smile playing at her lips. Because Agent Donovan isn't just investigating him. She's outside right now, waiting for him to leave. This was all part of the plan. As if on cue, they watched as a nondescript sedan pulled out after Ian's car, followed by another. "It's really over, isn't it?" Meredith said, more to herself than to Julia. "No," Julia replied gently. "It's just beginning." 1 year later, Meredith stood in the gallery of the city's contemporary art museum, surrounded by the soft murmur of voices and the gentle clink of champagne glasses. The exhibition, Recovered, Art and Artifacts of Deception, had been her brainchild, born from the ashes of her marriage. "Speech," someone called, and the crowd quieted, turning expectantly toward her. She took a deep breath, scanning the faces before her. Some were familiar. Alicia, her attorney who had become a friend, Catherine, Diane, and Rachel, the other women who had been caught in Ian's web, and Julia, who stood near the back, offering an encouraging smile. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Meredith began. "This exhibition represents many things. The recovery of stolen art and artifacts, yes, but also the recovery of truth, dignity, and self-worth for those who have been deceived." She gestured to the displays around them. Recovered artwork, jewelry, and artifacts, each with a story of theft and eventual return to its rightful owner. "A year ago, I discovered that my husband of 16 years had been systematically stealing my family jewelry, claiming it as lost or stolen, collecting insurance money, and then giving the pieces to other women." She paused, letting the murmurs of sympathy wash over her. "At first, I was devastated, ashamed. How could I have been so blind for so long? But then I met the other women in Ian's scheme." She nodded toward Catherine, Diane, and Rachel. "And instead of the jealousy and anger you might expect, I found solidarity, understanding, and ultimately, strength in our shared experience." She moved toward the centerpiece of the exhibition, a glass case containing her grandmother's sapphire bracelet, the emerald pendant, and other recovered pieces, displayed alongside the insurance documents that had been used to defraud. What began as a personal tragedy became something more, an investigation that uncovered a network of insurance fraud, identity theft, and financial crimes spanning 7 states. To date, 15 victims have come forward, and authorities believe there may be more. The room was silent now, captivated by her story. "Ian Carson will serve 12 to 15 years in federal prison," Meredith continued. "The plea deal he accepted required full restitution to all known victims, which is why many of the pieces you see here have been returned to their rightful owners." She picked up her champagne glass. "But this exhibition isn't about him. It's about resilience. It's about what happens after the betrayal, after the shock, after the grief. It's about reclaiming what was taken, not just physical objects, but our sense of agency and truth." "To new beginnings," she toasted, raising her glass. "To new beginnings," the crowd echoed. As the guests returned to their conversations, Meredith made her way to the back of the gallery where Julia waited. "That was quite a speech," Julia said, handing her a fresh glass of champagne. "Too dramatic?" Meredith asked with a small smile. "Just dramatic enough," Julia assured her. "The FBI called, by the way. They've located 2 more victims in Seattle." Meredith sighed. "Will it ever end?" "Eventually," Julia said. "But in the meantime, the Foundation is doing good work." The Foundation, officially named the Reclamation Project, had been Meredith's idea, funded partly by the restitution from Ian's case and partly by donations. It provided resources and support for victims of similar schemes, as well as education about financial fraud and abusive relationships. "Have you decided about the job offer?" Julia asked, referring to the position Meredith had been offered at the National Gallery in Washington. "I'm going to take it," Meredith said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "Fresh start. New city." "Congratulations," Julia said warmly. "You deserve it. What about you? Still chasing white-collar criminals with the feds?" Julia grinned. "Someone has to. Besides, I'm good at it." A comfortable silence fell between them. The friendship that had formed from shared trauma now evolved into something genuine and strong. "Do you ever think about him?" Julia asked after a moment. Wonder why he did it. Meredith considered the question. Less and less, she admitted. At first, I was obsessed with understanding. How could someone live such an elaborate lie for so long? Was any of it real? Did he ever love me? And now I realize it doesn't matter, Meredith said. His motivations, his justifications, they're irrelevant to my healing. What matters is what I do with the rest of my life. As if to punctuate her words, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. She glanced down to see a text from Agent Donovan. Final paperwork signed. All assets officially released. Congratulations, it's done. Meredith showed the message to Julia, a weight she hadn't realized she was still carrying suddenly lifted from her shoulders. It's really over, she said, echoing her words from a year earlier, but this time with certainty rather than question. No, Julia replied with a smile, repeating her response from that day. It's just beginning. Later that night, after the gallery had emptied and the last guests had gone, Meredith lingered among the exhibits. She stopped before a small display case containing a platinum wedding band, her own, mounted alongside a placard that read, "Sometimes the most valuable thing we recover isn't an object, but the truth about ourselves." The empty space left by betrayal eventually fills with wisdom, strength, and the possibility of something new. She touched her bare ring finger, the indentation long since faded. In its place was a small tattoo, a phoenix in flight, inked 6 months earlier on what would have been her 17th wedding anniversary. As she turned out the lights and locked the gallery doors, Meredith felt a sense of completion. The story of her marriage, its deceptions, revelations, and aftermath, had been transformed from private shame into public testimony, from personal wound into universal warning, from devastating loss into powerful reclamation. Outside, the night air carried the promise of autumn. New season, new beginning, new life. Meredith Carson stepped into it, ready at last to write the next chapter of her story, one that belonged entirely to her.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.